welcome to Sexually Charged Radio. I'm Thomas.
I'm Ruthie.
And we're here on this wonderful day talking to you, or night, I guess, if you're listening at night, talking to you about sex, gender, sexuality, relationships.
And dirty talk.
And dirty talk. But before we get into our topic today, it's been a little while since we've done a pronoun check-in and checking in on a fun fact about each other. So I thought maybe we could start with that.
Yeah, shout out to a certain faculty member at U of T, but I'm gender non-binary, so I'm genderqueer, and I identify with pronouns they and their, which means I don't identify as male or female, although I was assigned female at birth, so that does impact a lot of my life experiences and how I'm perceived, and thanks for asking.
Yeah, and so I'm Thomas. I use the pronouns he, him, and they as of today and right now in this moment. And yes, I identify as a gay, male, queer, gender learning and understanding individual. I just want to make up a term every single time I do the show. And I'm a graduate student here at the University of Guelph, focusing on workplace psychology and, in particular, diversity in the workplace. Mm-hmm. What about you, Ruthie? What do you focus on?
I'm a faculty member in the Couple and Family Therapy program, and I focus on the long-term resilience of trauma survivors, lots of different types of trauma. And I also focus on sexual pleasure and well-being, especially for folks with diverse gender, sexuality, or relationship types. Fun. I have a lot of sex toys in my office, is basically what some of that means. And I also get to teach and talk about fun things like dirty talk. And I was at a great conference in mid-October called Sex Down South, which I would highly encourage people to consider. It's a great sexuality conference with a lot of wonderful workshops at it and a very impressive dedication to anti-oppression in their framework. And I was really privileged to be able to do this workshop there. And there's a whole range of workshops at that one, and I wanted to talk about some of the conversation that came from that workshop and a little bit about the topic itself, because it wasn't just dirty talk, but it was more advanced dirty talk, and specifically the title of the workshop included the phrase lovingly objectified, and how that kind of dirty talk can make people feel good about themselves in spite of what one might assume from the topic.
And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've literally written the book.
I've written a book. I wouldn't necessarily say the book, but thank you so much. Yeah, I wrote The Nice Girl's Guide to Talking Dirty, which came out in 2011, and is really a sexual communication guide and a guide for kind of getting in touch with yourself, no pun intended, and what it is you like, kind of your authentic desires and interests, and how to figure out how to communicate that to someone else and how to receive theirs as well. And also fantasy sharing as a gift of vulnerability, but not an obligation to actually follow through on either side.
Yeah, and I have bought the book and I've actually gifted it to folks because it's a story, it's a book that everyone can benefit from. Not that we're necessarily plugging products on this show, but I think it's important to establish your credentials on this topic as we go forward. And personal credentials of just being an expert dirty talker.
I have been teaching about this at events for a long time, and have a fairly substantial amount of personal experience in this area as well. Yes, it's true. Both listening and speaking.
I have very little experience on this topic. I'm just going to put that out there. Mostly because I never have the fun things to say. So I'm hoping this conversation might help with
It's easy to get tongue-tied. It definitely is. And, there's lots of ways to think about dirty talk, and even just the word dirty, I think, can be intimidating right there. So dirty talk doesn't have to feel dirty, although we're going to talk about dirty talk that purposefully does feel kind of dirty in this segment. But it really is an act of sexual communication. It can be about establishing consent. It can be about negotiating what's good for everybody as you go. It can be just about sharing your bliss and your joy in the moment. It can be about being silly or nerdy. It can be about finding out, where your partner's joy is and where their desire is, and what you like about each other, what you like about yourselves, just describing the moment, or, not even using words, but the artful use of silence and body language and body positioning.
Noises.
Just, moaning and breathing and things like that, too, are all types of sexual communication.
And it doesn't just happen in the bathroom.
In the bathroom. I'm going to assume you meant the shower.
Well, yeah, of course. Lots of good things happen in the shower. It doesn't just happen in the bedroom. I mean, dirty talk can happen anywhere. Be on the phone, it can be in text messages, it can be in the elevator, it can be in the bathroom, it can be in the park, it can be on your way to work. There are lots of appropriate places that you can incorporate.
Anywhere you can flirt. You can have dirty talk. Now, of course, not everybody feels like they can flirt or flirt in very many places. And not everybody wants to use sexual communication this way either, which is also totally cool. I think maybe the important element is feeling that it's a mindful choice, whether you want to engage in this kind of talk or communication or not, instead of feeling like you can't do it or you have to do it. It's just something you've decided you want to or don't want to do.
So, for some of our listeners who might, be new to the idea of dirty talk, before we get into the objectification part, I'm wondering if you could just give us a couple tips or tricks of, what's an effective way to start talking dirty?
Yeah, so I like the idea of just starting with the 5 senses, and not necessarily all 5 of them, but even just picking 1 or 2, and just describing how those are for you, either in the moment or what you anticipate will happen or at some time in the past. So, if you really like the texture of your partner's skin, just letting them know that their skin feels nice, and maybe even a little bit about why. And this is assuming, of course, that they're okay with this kind of communication from you. But, it can be so wonderful to hear that the other person is enjoying being with you. We oftentimes worry so much about how we look and how we smell and how we're behaving, and we're so worried that we are not putting the best self or the most impossible self forward, that to hear a sense of reassurance from our partner can help us relax and feel appreciated and wanted. And so to give that gift to your partner, that you're noticing positive things about them and you like being there and you like them, is a great gift to give them. It can help them relax and feel comfortable with you, and it's a nice tone set for yourself and a way of focusing your own self. So even something as simple as, holding someone's hand or touching someone's arm or the side of their face, and just noting that you really like their skin. You like the texture of their skin or the color of their skin, or, the smoothness or the roughness of the skin. Any of those things can be great, and I would say, if you want to venture even a little farther, that if it happens to be something that is not the most mainstream beautiful thing in the world and you love that about them, to let them know. So, if your partner has a really furry back, that might be something that you really like about them, but is an easy thing to be shy about in this world, especially out of certain very small sub-communities, then, letting them know that can be great, or the softness of their tummy, or, the firmness of their hip bone protrusions, or whatever the case may be. And it doesn't have to be beautiful and poetic. It can also be, a song that makes you think of them, and having the guts to text them that lyric that makes you think of them, or play them that song, or tell them that there's a song that makes you think of them all the time and that you want to play it for them. And it can be a nasty song, it can be a romantic song, whatever the case may be. It could be, a song that doesn't even sound like it's about sex, but it just makes you really happy and they make you really happy. And so this isn't necessarily what people think of with the word dirty, but it really is about that sensual communication. And just starting with it at that level is great. It doesn't have to be a tired, script of stereotypical, so, oh, you're so dirty, do it harder, do more of this to me now, sort of stuff. If you like saying that, by all means, say it. But that can be intimidating and unsexy for a lot of people, especially if you're trying to plan your words ahead of time and you're not in the moment. It's much easier to feel good about those kinds of words when it just comes out of you instead of trying to plan it,
Yeah, you don't want to overthink too much.
Yeah, and the more you do it, the easier it gets, right? With all social skills, the more practice you have, the easier it gets. This is just a different kind of social skill.
Yeah, you're just working that tongue muscle. So, now that we've got a base understanding of dirty talk and what we can do, and, how do you increase, or how do you turn that level
up the intensity? So first of all, to say that just because something, I might refer to it as a more advanced level or a more intense level or a more risky level, doesn't mean that that's a goal that you're supposed to shoot for. It just means that it is more risky, and it does require, more willingness to mess up and more practice and more check-in type stuff, and it's not going to be a good or hot level for everybody. So this isn't some sort of gold standard somebody has to reach to. I get a lot of folks who talk to me almost in a confession style that what they really like and what turns them on is having people talk really dirty to them in a way that in any other context would be insulting and inappropriate. And they want to feel like a really sought-after sexual object. Or they want to express how much they desire their partner by treating their partner like a very sought-after sexual object. And not in a way that degrades their value as a human, but in a way that takes taboo and kind of owns it and leverages it to up the sexual energy and intensity in the relationship. And some people feel very guilty about that, either wanting it or wanting to do it.
Now, when you're talking about some of this, I'm wondering, what is the level of visibility or the public nature of this? Is this something that often happens behind closed doors, or is this something people want to be doing in, a more public domain, having this happen?
It totally depends on the people, and also recognizing the difference between fantasy and reality. So you may want to, have this partner that you really desire do this sexual thing that you really love, in the middle of public transit in front of all these people, and, have them see how dirty you are or whatever. But that could be your, I'll be in my bunk kind of fantasy, or it could be something that you want to talk about but not do. So maybe you don't want to talk about it. Maybe you do want to talk about it. Probably you don't want to actually do it, and I would maybe recommend not actually doing it, or perhaps doing it as a role play somewhere where the people witnessing it are consenting to be there, and you're not going to get arrested.
Well, because it can be difficult, especially if you're talking about certain things, and if that isn't the social norm, you may have individuals who intervene or speak up because they're a little concerned about things that could be said or...
Right. I mean, if you're doing something that looks like abuse and would be abuse in a different context, in a different situation, then people are right to be concerned about that. Absolutely. And also exposing other people to very direct sexual acts and things like that can be a violation of those other people's consent. So I don't mean exposing people to the basics of your sexual orientation or your gender, things like that, but to more explicit acts.
Okay. So maybe to help make this a little more tangible, do you have an example or something that you can use me if you need to, or...
I can use you if I need to. There's a good example right there.
See, it's almost like we have that planned.
It's right there.
Yeah, just ways of making that objectification seem more real for our listeners.
Yeah, so, there's a lot of romanticizing of a very strong, masculine guy who has this real desire for this sexy, sexy woman, and she just wants to be taken, sort of thing. And we have this media portrayal of that happens all the time in movies and things like that. And it's a very common, heterosexual fantasy. Not that only heterosexual people think about it, but this particular fantasy is focusing on heterosexuality. And that in itself is a bit objectifying. Being taken, I want you so much I can't help it. I want someone who wants me so much that they're ravaging me in all the ways that I like best. And that is objectifying. You're treating each other like objects or like animals. There's not a lot of focus on consent in it. There's some sort of ideas that it's going to be rough, but only in the best ways. And that's a bit objectifying. And that's a very, very common fantasy for all kinds of genders. And in fact, some people are familiar with research, repeated research, that shows that one of the most popular fantasies for all genders are rape fantasies. And I really like how my friend Midori talks about it, which is that it's really not so much about rape, but it's about ravagement. It's about whoever I desire to be doing this the most, doing this in the way that's most delightful to me, and almost having permission to really enjoy it and give yourself over to the sensory experience of it and to be that desired, right? Which is very different from rape, right? But in the fantasy sense, we're contextualizing it that way.
And just before we go on to our next part of this conversation, I just want to remind viewers that you're listening to Sexually Charged Radio at 93.3 FM in the Guelph region. You could also be listening to us online at cfru.ca or streaming us at
YouTube, and you can just search for Sexually Charged and you'll find many of our episodes there. We're always putting them up online there after a bit. And you can email your questions to our wonderful student volunteers at AskSC, which is the initials for Sexually Charged, at uoguelph, GUELPH.ca, and they'll field your questions and your topic suggestions and hand some of them over our way. And they are wonderful, and we're so grateful to all their help with editing and posting and question fielding.
Yeah, so we're talking about lovingly objectifying through dirty talk, and Dr. Ruthie has been giving some of their expertise here, which has been enlightening so far. Mm-hmm. So, as things get rougher in dirty talk...
At least verbally, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Verbally, yes.
Well, I mean, it could be physically, too, if everybody's on board and you're safe and all that good stuff.
Where are the limits?
The limits are wherever they need to be, and it's not just where they need to be in general, but for this day, for this person, for this relationship, for this set of activities. And one of the questions I'm often asking people, when especially people I haven't had very much experience with or any experience yet, is how will I know if this is not going right for you? Mm-hmm. And how will you know if this is not going right for me? And so that's because these things can always be changing, and we don't always necessarily know when or where those lines are boundaries. We have an idea of things that are definitely boundaries for us, but, anything at that moment can change it. If my stomach is suddenly not feeling well and I didn't anticipate that 15 minutes ago, that changes everything. Or, if this person that I'm playing with suddenly uses a phrase that isn't really common, that reminds me of another person I played with that it went really wrong, that could change a lot of things for me suddenly that I couldn't anticipate, right? Whatever the case may be. So it's where it's at, and it's making sure that that the other person, that all people involved know that there is mutual respect for each other as people, as humans with human dignity, as partners, whether it's very temporary, casual, disposable partners, or whether it's more long-term people, and really striving to do your best. And if you're the person who's the top or the dominant or the initiator or the ravager, however you want to put it, recognizing that you have responsibility to be facilitating this thing that is pleasing to you, but also is limited to what is pleasing to the other person. And that is your responsibility, and hopefully for the person who wants to be on the receiving side of this, because there is power inherent in this. I mean, both people could be equally going at each other. That's an option too. But if it is in this power dynamic, that the person who's on the receiving side is making sure that they feel like they're in a good place to be communicating their needs and limits as well, and that everybody can opt out if it doesn't feel like that's going to work.
So you brought up this idea of power. Mm-hmm. I think that's, we've talked about power a fair bit on this show.
I do like to talk about power.
And dominance and, the privilege that can be associated with that. Now, when we're talking about different identities and intersecting identities, and some identities have more power than others, how does dirty talk play into that? Like, where are the lines, or are there lines?
When I was doing this workshop at Sex Down South, which is a fantastic conference, somebody in the audience asked a great question, which is, what about objectification could possibly be attractive or hot? And they shared that, they spend their whole life fighting against being objectified. It's an everyday thing for them. And that was a fantastic point and a really relevant part to the conversation. So there is a lot of privilege in feeling like you can engage in dirty talk that has this power element or this objectifying element to it, even in a very loving way, and then step out of that space and feel very comfortable and confident that you're in a world that isn't really objectifying you that much all the time. That's a lot of privilege, for many, many folks, for intersectional reasons around, gender and sexuality and ethnicity and ability and age and mobility and all sorts of different education and income, all sorts of things. If you're spending a lot of time being humiliated and objectified in a non-sexy way by this world, then it requires all the more mindfulness if you and your partners want to engage in it in a sexy way. So it can be very liberating for both camps that we're talking about here, in that you're taking a taboo and you're owning it, and you are hopefully using it in a way that helps you feel free and feel in control. And if you're the person who's being dirty talked to, so in the kind of the more submissive or whatever role, that you should feel all the more free. You should feel all the more free by this, that you're getting to engage in this thing on your terms, that you're having some part of your identity affirmed in a way that's taboo, right? And it should feel great. And so making sure that it is something that does that, because the people that are engaging in it really do have that level of respect for each other, and they can step out of that role afterwards and support each other in it, and they're keeping it within a framework that promotes that sense of freedom and doesn't tap into something that's going to hurt for afterwards.
Now, do you think that's something easier to do with recurring partners, or is it something that you have the skill, if you've practiced enough, you're pretty capable of doing that with new partners?
I think if you want to take yourself to a more vulnerable emotional level, most things are easier with repeat partners that you've built knowledge, experience, and trust with. Of course, not all repeat partners are folks that we build trust with. So, on the other hand, it may be that it is easier with folks that you don't have to see again. So that you can just walk away from that experience, good or bad. And perhaps with the most casual partners, you may be limiting the experience to a certain set of words or a certain set of behaviors instead of just a longer time of general exploration. Everybody does different things with their casual partners, so that's really speaking in generality. But perhaps that might also contribute to the walk away. But there's risks with both, right? If you do this with somebody very casual and you don't have as much communication and you maybe don't have as much investment in each other, you could get hurt. And if you do this with somebody that you're very close with and something goes wrong, which if you do this enough, something will go wrong. Lots of somethings will go wrong. This is, we make mistakes. We are accountable. Maybe we keep going if we decide to or we don't. You could damage the relationship in a way that's difficult to come back from. And so that's a risk too. So it's kind of choosing your risks.
Yeah, and I think a lot about sex positivity. That's a phrase we use a lot on the show, and one of our past episodes, if you go and search it out, you can see how we've defined sex positivity. It feels like, getting into dirty talk and trying to be sex positive, are those things that go together? Are they conflicting?
It's not an obligation to do this in order to be sex positive. There's no obligations other than withholding your judgment from, in situations where people are mutually consenting, right? But it is an opportunity for a type of communication, and if it's something that you love or that other people love, being sex positive means considering whether you may want to explore it or not. And it may not be the time or place. But if it's something that you don't love, sex positive means don't do it, right? Or that you wouldn't love to do for whatever reason. Maybe you love it because you hate it. I don't know. But if there's not something about it that is desirable to you, then you don't do it. Because it's not very positive to be... where's the consent if you're forcing yourself to do things that you don't really want to do? That's not very sex positive. That sounds sex miserable, And there's absolutely nothing wrong with sexual communication being sweet and endearing and cherishing without these kinds of power dynamics. That's like, I'm getting a little like, oh, I want to snuggle, like just thinking about that. And I teach these workshops, So that's a good question. Thank you for asking that. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I come from a perspective, I would like to say, a very feminist background that tries to disassemble misogyny and objectification that goes with it. But then, as you were describing everything and that reclaiming piece, I can understand why, going and doing some of this loving objectification or lovingly objectifying someone can really be an empowering stance.
Yeah.
But I don't think it you have to kind of pause yourself. You have to say, I know this is not going to sound right at first, or it's going to sound a little off, but if I try to open myself to what you're saying, and I'm hearing it, and I'm feeling, okay, I could see how this could be used. And, there are friends of mine who, in their sexual encounters, have derogatory terms used towards them.
Yeah.
And
they love it.
And they love it. And for me, it's always been a bit of a struggle. I'm like, that's a word that I don't use, or it has to be used.
It's got a lot of negative baggage, and it's hard to feel like there might be positive associations with it.
But then that's not my identity, or that's not my sexual experience, and that's up to them and their consensual agreement with that partner. So.
You mentioned being a feminist, so I want to talk very briefly about a thing that comes up with us a lot, which is, what if somebody wants to use or have used with them language that does feel sexist or homophobic or transphobic or any of those things like that, and not all the time, not in everyday life, but within very specific sexual contexts at specific times with specific people, and does that make you a bad feminist, or whatever the case may be? What do you think, Thomas?
I mean, so my definition of feminism, it might not conform to any definition that's out there, and it's about making rules for yourself about your life that seek to be inclusive and seek to be respectful and seek to empower everyone into the life and the situations that they want. So if you are in a consensual situation with someone else and this is what you want, and that's what the other person wants too, then no, you're not a bad feminist.
It's like a freedom of choice, a mindful freedom of choice.
You said two words that really tried to capture everything. Darn it, that's all I meant to.
That was a fantastic explanation. And I think but I really want to bring that point home, because I see so many workshops and so many conversations, and these are important workshops and ongoing conversations, that wanting to submit, if you're a woman, doesn't make you a bad feminist, right? And certainly wanting to be dominant and be a woman doesn't make you a bad feminist, and all of these other kinds of things. And I running in queer circles, I know plenty of queer folks who have fantasy queer bashing scenes with each other, with other queers, and that is an empowering and sexy thing for them. And I know plenty of queers who don't even like the word queer, much less the idea of doing that kind of scene, and that's awesome too. So there is this freedom, this mindfulness, and this kind of political element that we can choose to engage in or not, and liking it or not liking it doesn't make you good or bad. It's we're all delightfully complicated sexual beings, or asexual beings, as the case may be.
I love that, delightfully complicated. And I think that's this topic, right? I mean, at its core essence, it's complicated, and that's why you said it's advanced. If it's your first time engaging in dirty talk, don't hit for the home run. Hit for first base.
Baby steps. Yeah.
Or not even for first base. Just swing and get used to that feeling. And dirty talk with yourself. Dirty talk with
read dirty stories.
Read dirty stories.
Yeah.
Talk dirty to the television character. That's
anonymous
on the screen.
Chat where people can come and go from that conversation very easily. Yeah.
Yeah. So work your way up. You don't have to jump right into the deep end. But, if you've gotten to that stage and you're with someone who's open to this idea, practice. Be willing to laugh at yourself. Be willing to make some mistakes. Be willing to forgive each other.
And yourself.
Yeah. That's what I'm taking away from this message. What about you, Ruthie?
I'm just remembering that you're okay with me using you, and that's what I'm going to take away from this conversation.
Well, Sexually Charged Radio, that you heard it here today first, that Ruthie is allowed to use
Thomas
me.
didn't know that. Neither did I.
I feel like this is a verbal contract going on.
It's recorded.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening to us today on 93.3 FM or CFRU.ca, or perhaps you're listening to us on YouTube, and we will see you at the next episode. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you, Ruthie.